Hello and welcome to Eternal Durdles. I'm your host, Zach Clark, and with me as always, Phil Blackman. Phil, how's it going, man?
Dude, it's going so good. Can you believe it? Sensei's Divining Top is coming back.
Well, before we get too far into it, we should also announce our guest, Joe Dyer from MTGGoldfish.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Friend of the cast.
Yes, it's been a while.
Yeah, man. This is a perfect time to bring you back.
Your super episode with Nate that I was on, I think the last time I was.
Oh, yeah, the 200th episode.
Yeah.
That was a blast. Man, we got to do more stuff like that. I want to do that game show episode we were talking about. That'd be so much fun.
Yeah.
I get to be. Sure. I mean, obviously, I would just be the host of the game show. I'd be your Chuck Woolery.
Right.
Who wants to be a magician? And
can I phone a friend?
Hollywood magicians.
Yeah. You get to
Perfect.
phone a friend, but like it's only who will answer you in a text message in 20 seconds.
You can phone Richard Garfield.
Yeah, it's the only person.
That's hard.
Yeah, so this episode, I guess this episode is in direct response to the ban and restricted announcement.
Yep.
So I guess
the lack thereof.
I guess
I mean, there technically was a ban announcement for one format. Or actually two formats, I should say. But
I feel like we should read that announcement, and of course, I did not pull it up. So
I'm way ahead of you.
Yeah, great.
I have a thought about the Pioneer ban, so the announcement of the Pioneer bannings.
Keep stalling for time.
No, it's not even stalling, guys. It's legit.
Go for it.
In the Pioneer ban, when they banned Winota and they banned expressive iteration, right? And then they said in their breakdown, effectively, that Dig Through Time and Treasure Cruise, even though they're on the radar, that they feel as though without fetch lands in the format, that they are still reasonably powerful, reasonable power level for the format, and that it gives Pioneer blue decks their own identity separate from other Eternal formats. Right. And that is as close to saying we think these are what we consider pillars of the format as they're ever going to actually say. So the same way that they've called that they've alluded to Force of Will and Wasteland and Brainstorm being pillars of legacy, and Mishra's Workshop and Bazaar of Baghdad being pillars of vintage. It sounds to me like the busted delve spells are effectively now pillars of Pioneer. But also what that suggests for the other Eternal formats, all the people that have been talking about expressive iteration being a potential ban target, if expressive iteration is outside of Pioneer now, and that they want identities for the Eternal formats to be different, that EI is safer in my mind now than it was ever before.
I don't think that's true.
I hate it.
I don't think it's safer at all. I think it probably means that they're probably eyeing it for other formats too, especially since they called it out being a multi-format all-star.
Yeah,
I think it can be interpreted that way, or that EI is now safe because it's different. They're obviously opposite ends of the spectrum, but at least there's it's not waffling in the middle now. It's either untouchable or it's got to go, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So I'm going to just read the legacy part of the ban announcement, and we can react to it. Since the ban of Ragavan Nimble Pilfer in January, the win rate of Izzet Delver has come down, and the deck now shows appropriate strengths and weaknesses against the other most played archetypes. Reanimator, Control, Resource Denial, Combo, and Aggro are all additional macro archetypes that are seeing success. We continue to keep an eye out for potentially unhealthy or unfun play patterns, but otherwise, natural metagame forces currently look sufficient to handle any short-term shifts in deck popularity. Clap it up for me because I have a huge learning disability, and reading that was a and that was like one sentence all the way through. There's three sentences?
Yeah.
Jeez, man.
Watsy loves to run on sentences. Okay, we can talk about their assessment of what macro archetypes actually are in the format, and the idea that Reanimator is a macro archetype is crazy to me. But the one thing that I wish they would do is when they say things that don't have definitions, like everybody's going to interpret them wildly differently. I really wish they would just go a little bit. So when they
macro
say
archetypes,
but even before that, when they say that there are sufficient tools, what was the line? Can you read the line again right before macro archetypes, where they're like, we feel that there are sufficient tools or whatever?
Yes. We'll continue to keep an eye out for potentially unhealthy or unfun play patterns, but otherwise, natural metagame forces currently look sufficient to handle any short-term shifts in deck popularity. Is that what you're talking about?
One before that?
They didn't mention anything about tools.
Yeah,
that's functionally what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
It would be really nice if they went, we think that these are the tools that are sufficient for the format, and here's why, like that, we believe that's enough, even if not every color has access to whatever.
Were you looking for the line where they said it's totally fine to play 5 to 6 red elemental blasts in every deck? And we think that's healthy? They think that's a good idea.
I think when they're looking at the tools that inform their decision and then they don't specify what those tools are, it means that the only conversation that we have are we can argue past each other because we're not talking about the same things because we don't know what those things are. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so I don't want to bury the lead here. My takeaway and really what this episode is about is it's time, guys. We need a legacy advisory committee, like a board. It needs to happen officially or unofficially. I just feel like it's ridiculous that we're still sitting here, 6 months late, 5 months later, and the format is still dominated by Blue-Red Delver in such a way that like the only people who aren't playing Blue-Red Delver are just trying to have fun in the format. Like you're either trying to win or you're trying to have fun, right? Like
you're playing a deck that ranches Blue-Red Delver and specifically.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So like to me, like that's not fun. Magic the Gathering is to like be like, well, I'm specifically either going to play to win, or I'm going to play something that is my personal identity as a player, or F this deck. That is not 3 pillars of a format to me. That is an unbalanced format when you have to decide if you want to play something that's interesting or play something that wins, right?
Should we dish it to Joe to talk about where the numbers actually
Let's talk about those numbers, Joe.
Yeah, so
you're the Steve Kornacki of our legacy.
Oh
podcast.
wow, the Steve Kornacki of Magic.
Wow.
What a moniker.
That's
What
wild.
moniker.
Wow, that's wild. I mean, yeah, so things are still kind of at this point where we've got Delver sitting at as of the current spreadsheet and stuff like that, which was just updated this morning from last weekend. So this goes all the way back to 1/29/2022, which is the first event. We had passed the banning of Ragavan, and we currently are up to about we're almost to 4,000 decks that have been recorded by this. We'll probably hit that probably in the next few weeks because it's 3,911 decks that we have hit across. So that's pretty reasonable sample size, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
We've got a pretty good sample base of data.
I mean, for Legacy Magic the Gathering, it's about as good as you're going to get, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty good from end of January till now. So
I think it's exceptional. I think it's an exceptionally dense sample size.
Right. So 20.5% of that is Blue-Red Delver. So 802 decks is just all Blue-Red Delver.
1 out of every 5 decks is Blue-Red.
So right now it has an estimated win percentage without mirrors of 54.3%. And that is with a 28.5% metagame share and the entire format gunning for it.
Yeah.
That's what I think is the big takeaway. Now, here's the thing about their statements. The thing to think about. When they make these statements, I went back and I looked at the Ragavan ban, and I realized rather quickly that they're talking about league data a lot of the time, which is data we don't have access to.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of the big issue is they're talking about data we don't know. We don't have anything to do with that because we can't see that data because it's all curated and all that stuff.
So
it's a black hole.
Should more, rather than everybody calling for bans, should we, like, even if they're reasonable, should we actually be calling for WotC to just let us have league data? Because then we could actually understand where they're coming from when they say, hey, we think that we think there are effective tools because they're looking at data that we can't see. So we have no idea if their assessment is reasonable or not. We just go, how are they not making moves?
Right. Yeah, because they're not transparent enough.
So
I think
beyond that,
should it be
I think-
transparency more than calls for? Should we be arguing for transparency over bans, or do you think that this data is sufficient to?
I think they should be better transparent about things.
I mean, my answer. I mean, obviously, Joe, you're doing the legwork here. My answer would be both.
That's fair. No, I mean, I do agree that there should be changes. Don't get me wrong.
You know?
I do agree that there should be changes. I think they should take Murktide and Expressive Iteration up back and shoot them. And I'm on record saying that a lot.
Yeah,
like,
I think that's the general consensus. Is like
I don't like delve on things that are proactive cards and on threats and proactive spells. So I don't think that those are good. That's a good mechanic for that. I don't think anybody's arguing against cards like, nobody's complaining about cards like Logic Knot, for example. Nobody's complaining about cards like Murderous Cut. I think delve is fine on those kinds of cards. I don't think it's fine on a blue card that is ridiculously one of the best clocks the format has ever seen.
Joe, assuming they get rid of Murktide Regent, how do you feel about Bane of Progress? Or Bane of
Sailor's Bane?
Sailor's Bane.
Well, that card has to be on Magic Online first.
Yeah.
So yeah.
But like that's technically delve, right? Like that's delve.
Sort of, yeah.
Right. It's better version of delve as far as I'm concerned, because like you're gonna get that either way. And
I disagree. I disagree that it's better than delve. It's not like specifically Sailor's Bane isn't soft to graveyard hate, but it doesn't care about fetch lands, and that's huge.
True.
Yeah,
that's different. That's huge.
Yeah, you're not wrong. You're not wrong.
Yeah, and that card can be blocked.
So that's the thing is this card a reasonable card to have in the format if we do get rid of Murktide? Do you think that this is a reasonable answer?
I would argue that Sailor's Bane is totally reasonable because it doesn't care about fetch lands. The fact that fetch lands do not convert as Lotus Petals after you've used them to turn on your delve threats, the fact that you can bring down a Murktide or whatever as like a 5/5 because you've fetched twice, wastelanded them once, and cast a Ponder and a Brainstorm, versus if you have to get Sailor's Bane for 2 mana, you actually have to cast 7 spells. Yes. Or dump them off of like DRs. You have to work to put 7 spells into the yard. Now, even if it can get around graveyard hate, sure, but like that is 7 spells that need to go from some other zone into your graveyard or into exile. So like Force of Will pitching a spell is 2 cards for a Sailor's Bane, but like that's still work.
Right.
You can't just get fetch land. Because Sailor's Bane doesn't work with fetch lands, it's fine.
And Joe brings up a good point. It can be blocked infinitely. Like you can just keep blocking it.
And again, it has to also be on Magic Online first.
Yeah. Well, we were talking, Joe and I were talking before the cast that there are so many cards from the new set that aren't even on Magic Online yet. And it's like, what are you guys doing?
And that is currently one of them.
Yeah.
So yeah, fun times.
Joe, question for you, Joe.
Yeah.
Blue Endeavor at 20.5%. And I'm looking at the data sheet here that the second most played archetype is Jeskai Control. Jeskai Control, I assume, is like is pretty much like War of the Spark Planeswalker Control with Days Undoing somewhere in the deck.
Yeah, basically.
More or less. Okay.
Yeah. Although that does encompass pretty much all of the Jeskai Control decks. But
it's pretty much Super Friends, right?
Right. Well, yes, but like a lot of the newer builds of that deck have been trending more towards Mentor.
Oh, okay.
Like the Ozymandias 17, the Matt Book lists that are kind of playing with either playing like Mentor and like Snapcaster Mage, and they're playing, Teferi, and they're not playing Days Undoing. They're not playing any of that stuff. They're just playing, white base removal, blue base spells, sideboard cards for red that are like just blasts for sideboard and stuff like that. So
like just got good cards.
Yeah, just got good cards. Yeah, basically is what it boils down to. Yeah,
so that's an 8.5%.
Iteration. Yeah, he's been playing like Fire and Ice, even like.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like it's like stuff like that. Wandering Emperor. He just won one of the challenges this past weekend. Actually, Vuk did with this list, and it's like Dress Down and like Expressive Iteration and Plow and Prismatic Ending and Wandering Emperor and just boatloads of removal. Basically, is what it boils down to. And that's what lets those decks kind of stay on par with Delver, is that they have tons of removal.
What are the current top decks, right? Like you got Blue Red Delver and then Jeskai and then what, like 8 cast.
8
The
cast.
only other
5%.
Green, white
Death and
depths.
Taxes at 5.4.
Green white depths.
Green white depths.
Yeah, I think green white depths is one of the better decks of the format.
Then Reanimator is like 4.2.
Yeah. Because depths specific.
Elves?
Okay, so depths does require some real understanding to play the deck well. But the thing about the deck is it ranches Delver pretty well.
Yeah.
Because they're now
sense.
splashing red for sideboard
Why
cards.
not?
Yeah.
And they have the ability because they play Mox Diamond. And that's the thing. Mox Diamond decks traditionally do a pretty good job of dealing with Delver in general. And that's why it's a pretty reasonable deck.
I'm not a green white depths aficionado, but do you think part of that problem might be the fact that so much of the format is blue-red Delver, that blue-red Delver is skewing sideboard cards that would normally be good against a deck like that, like Submerge, for more red elemental blasts?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like, you have to wonder, about the sideboard cards. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, they are definitely still playing stuff like Submerge and stuff like that. I've seen most recently decks playing it again because depth decks are back on the rise.
Yeah.
Green has kind of dropped as the control color again. So we're starting to see less of the Uro piles. So people are not playing cards like Veil of Summer anymore. So we had a big weekend where mono black depths, of all things, like ranched a couple challenges here or there and just did really well because
or Borgonet.
You can't submerge their Merit Lage if they're just playing swamps.
It's true.
So like it's pretty strong. So, but that's why you're starting to see cards like Price of Progress show back up again in the Delver sideboards. Those are the kind of cards that are coming in again because things like Green White Depths, lands is really good right now. 8 mulch, the 8 mulch deck is really good against Delver.
Yeah.
It's one of its best matchups. Like it's so good against Delver, but it struggles against some of the other control piles, like the Jeskai control decks that are playing cards like Ruination and those kinds of back to basics or stuff like that. Like Mono Red Prison is back. Red Stompy decks are kind of back because a lot of the prismatic ending has fallen out of the format a little bit less because only decks that are playing it are like Jeskai. And
they're playing so many different colors, so many different casting costs that a Chalice on 1 doesn't even matter that much to them.
Right. And so the deck is not so good against the Jeskai decks, but it's really good against Delver. So, and they just got a couple new tools from the past couple sets, cards like Fable, the Mirror Breaker, and Unlicensed Hearse. Especially Unlicensed Hearse is especially really good against Delver because you're able to knock them off Delirium. You're able to knock them off Delve for
that's wild. That was a card that we looked at and we're like, that seems pretty good, but like it's kind of become sort of a format powerhouse.
It's really good. Yeah, the card is actually super amazing. I've even seen some Delver decks play it. Because
the fact that you can cast it off an Ancient Tomb on 1, if Unlicensed Hearse was spoiled as a 1-drop, we would have been over the moon.
Oh yeah,
right.
We would have been getting that with our Urza sagas. Let's be for real.
I have a quick question on where, Joe, after looking through all the data that you've gone through, if I can recall correctly, when Top Miracles, my heart was the best deck, and Top got banned at that point, it was around 13% of the field. Mm-hmm. And then when Deathrite Shaman got banned, it was approximately the same, like 4-color control, or Grixis Delver was also around, was it around 20% like Blue Red Delver is now?
Something like that, yeah. Yeah, if I recall correctly.
I'm just curious, what do you guys think is the threshold for a deck being, a deck's density in a format being too high? So here it's 20.5%, which is obviously high, or it feels high, at least compared to the other decks.
Right.
But like, if Jeskai is at 8.5%, does that mean that the threshold is somewhere at like, once you peak over 12%, is that too much? Or is that like, where's the line where you're like, we should take a look at this?
I think 20.5% is pretty high, personally.
25%, yeah. I'm saying what's the line where you're like if the baseline is okay, 12% is probably where a deck should cap if that format is reasonably healthy.
And I think 12% is a reasonable number. Yeah, I think that's a reasonable number.
because then that just gives a sense of, because I'm looking at 20.5% and I go, okay, yeah, this is high, but is it more or less the same that Delver has been forever? Or
Right.
is like being over whatever we deem to be whatever we collectively believe the threshold is for a dex density being too high?
I think
8% over the threshold is very steep.
I think, Phil, the thing is it's a combined number. It's not just the percentage played, it's the percentage winning too. And when you combine those two numbers, if it's over X percentage, like if there was a deck that only this is going to be a bad analogy, but if there's a deck that like not many people were playing but was winning 100% of the time, eventually someone's going to get to a point where everyone's playing that deck, right?
Okay,
right.
So I want to know hypothetically, if Blue Red Delver was 20.5% of the field like it is now, but its win rate was 44%, is anybody calling for bans?
No.
Why would you?
No.
Well, because I'm asking because one of the premier factors they've used for bans previously has been diversity of the format.
Right.
So if I mean, we're in a position where this is fairly easy because a deck is being played at an absurd percentage and is winning at a really high clip. But I'm trying to think of I'm trying to articulate what my question is here. But if dex percentage is really high, do we care that it's percent of the metagame, or do we care more about win percentage?
I think you can't take any single number into account in that scenario. I think you have to take the whole picture.
Yeah.
Because the problem there is when you dial in on one single number, you tend to tunnel vision on that, and you tend to not see other things that are occurring. And that's what anybody that is saying, well, Delver only has a 54% or 54% meta win rate. Like that doesn't seem that good. Like it seems average, and it's not the 56% win rates that they have cited in the past of being problematic. So people are like, well, it's fine because it's only 53 or 54%, win rate. Well, what you also tend to forget too is that as you add more players to a deck, the more players you have on a deck in that regards, the lower your win rate is going to go to normalize to 50%, towards 50%, because eventually you get to a point where if that's the only thing that's played, your win rate is 50%, because one deck has to win, one player has to win, one player has to lose.
Yes.
So you have to think about that too.
There's a bit of what's the word I'm looking for? Cannibalism that's happening there.
Right. And not only that, you also have to consider too that we're not able to really truly account for skill, and you can't do that because it's biasing the data at that point. But if you think about how Delver plays and how people recommend Delver's recommended a lot to newer players in the format, and because it is a deck that traditionally teaches you how to do things in Legacy, the format.
Not to mention it's financially like a stable move to make into the format.
Correct. It's a deck that teaches you how to cast Force of Will. It's a deck that teaches you how to cast Brainstorm, Ponder, all those cards that are kind of important cards in the format, and it teaches you how to play those cards. So people pick that up, but Delver has a pretty high skill floor. It takes a long while to get really good with Delver. And when you're really good with Delver, you get to see those people that are really good with Delver do really well. Your Daniel Goetschels and your Rich Callies and those players that are just so good at the deck that they can step into a tournament and just go get there. I'm reminded of the fact that I'm friends with Brian Koval, and he comes and plays at these Buffalo Chicken Dip events that my buddy Rob Wilson runs. And he came to the last one and he was just like, I can't do it anymore. I can't play this Bant deck anymore, this dark Bant deck anymore. I got to play something else. He goes, I'm going to play the best deck in the format, what's perceived as the best deck in the format. And he makes top 8.
Yeah.
And that's just it. Like
there are players that can just do that.
Right. You're a good player with good fundamentals. Delver's a great deck for that. And so, but it's hard to account for that in data. And that's problematic. Like you can't account for that because you're introducing bias into the whole thing, and that doesn't help your thing. So you do have to take the win rates, and you have to look at it and go, okay, well, obviously there's a little bit of skew here, and that's why we have in this sheet, you can see there's also like we have like the Wilson, like the confidence intervals and all that stuff introduced in there. We also have like the min and max of what it could possibly be, where that range sits or whatnot. And right now, and Delver's the only one in this list of all these decks that we've recorded that has a minimum of over 50%. It's 51.77% is its low. So it's good. It's probably too good. Like, that's the problem. But we don't know exactly what data they're looking at, whether they're looking at this data or they're looking at strictly league data. And that's kind of like the disconnect, I think, like from what Wizard says.
I would guess that based on what I think the telling line here, that their data is extremely different from the data that we're looking at, is what they classified as macro archetypes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
because
I agree.
Them putting Reanimator as a macro archetype, and then I'm looking at the list here and it's 4.2%. That's on the higher end of all of the deck lists, but it's not in the top 5.
Right.
So
right.
I think there is a discrepancy there, and there isn't really a way for us to know, but like that's the telling line to me, is what they put as other archetypes, because they didn't put graveyard based decks. They put
Reanimator. Yeah. The Reanimator has had its pop-ups here or there in the past couple months. Like for a while there, like it was popping up in the challenges for like no reason at all. Mm-hmm. And it was just like, oh, okay, well, Reanimator's back for like a little bit. And then people started kind of respecting it, and then it went away again. So I don't know. It's weird. Yeah, that part is strange to consider. Like, and of course, like you do have like, Sneak and Show is still in there, but like I don't see a lot of Sneak and Show either. Like, very recently.
It's wild because that was a deck. It's a deck we're not seeing almost at all anymore, right? What's the percentage of that even, like?
2.9%, but that's also the format right now is a 6 red blast format.
Yeah, right. But that's what I'm saying. Like you see a format like a deck like that at 2.9% when it was probably in the like high 6s at one point, right? Which is a lot. If you compare that to like what Elves is at right now, which is like 4%, right. And like I run into Elves more than anybody else because I play Rug Delver. But like, you see Elves like every local you go to, you see Elves maybe like 1 in every 12 matches at best,
Right.
I think Elves, if Elves had any crossover cards, like if to be an Elves player, you have to commit to 4 Guys Cradle. I think Elves is one of those decks where it's way better than the number of people that play it. Like the percentage that. In terms of how well Elves does in really competitive tournaments, 4.3% and a 50% win rate feels extremely low to me, given its results at the top tables.
Right.
But it's also one of those decks where it's like, to play it in paper at least, it's way more expensive with 0 crossover.
And it's a pretty difficult deck to learn.
And it's difficult, yeah.
Yes. I played Elves for an event. And I learned really hard how hard that deck is to play. Like it's really difficult.
It's a testament to that 10-year-old girl that wrecks shop with it every time.
I know, right?
Dressed as Nissa.
Right. Yeah, shout out to Dana Fisher. That's awesome.
When you're a true planeswalker, everything comes easy.
And there are some really strong, like the thing is we see Elves make top 8s on the legacy challenges on Magic Online quite a bit, because there are quite a few very strong Elves players on Magic Online. Namely, obviously Newton Hang is like the godfather of the Elves cabal at this point. And like Testacular and Aaron Relentless, Jork Heinrich. He's also like a really super good Elves player. Runcor is also a really good Elves player. Conversely, at least, let me see here, at least
Julian
all
exists.
three of those people, those last 3 people I made, are part of the data collection effort. Yeah. So shout out to those guys, because those guys really put in the work.
Well, that's a good point that you're making right there, actually, is that so if we had this advisory committee, that's like the kind of people that we want on the committee, the people who are actually looking at this data and willing to work with it, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so they're not necessarily the Zach Clarks and Phil Blackmans of the legacy community, as well known as we are. But they're sort of the people working behind the scenes doing the, like, what I would consider God's work.
It's very tedious. Let me tell you, it's very tedious.
And I think that's sort of the reason why we don't have a committee like that. Like, if you look at the Pauper Committee, like, if someone told me Pauper Committee, who would you choose? Alex Ullman is like, duh. Like, he is like, I met that guy playing in a limited event, but like, everything about that guy after that is about Pauper, right? Like, that guy exudes Pauper. All he does is Pauper. And I don't think that the people we want for the advisory committee are on that level of putting themselves out there for legacy. As far as names are concerned,
I think, like, if I had to really think about it, I think some of the really good people that I think could be on it would be people like Mount Vuk, Ozymandias, because I don't know if you guys noticed that he does these monthly, like, tier lists and stuff like that based on the data we collect. And he does all these other different things with that and puts some stuff out there and his thoughts and stuff like that. And so he's kind of doing that already in a sense. And so I think he would be a good fit for it. Also, I think, like, guys like Rob Wilson, Buffalo Chicken Dip legacy guy, I think he would be fantastic for it as well. I love Rob to death. Like, he's a super good friend of mine. So
I don't know how many people they have on the Pauper community board. Like,
they have a lot and they would need people that would like be across.
They have one from each continent.
Yeah, they would have to have people from each continent.
Well, that's good. So that's all it is 7 people, or I guess 6 people. There's no one from Antarctica playing.
Yes, I think that's only 6 people.
That seems low for what I think would be the correct amount for kind of a symposium for legacy.
I feel like I just want to quick interjection. The longer that we've been talking about the data set, and we've been talking about, like, inaction in the format and all this, should everybody just be way louder about how it's horseshit that they can seal data?
Yeah, I agree with that.
Doesn't that just feel fucking dumb?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. There needs to be far more transparency.
That's like the U.S. election system being like, this is the president. We're not telling you how that happened.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree with that. No, I do think that there should be a lot more transparency in their data, especially for these formats. I understand why.
Like, for standard, I understand because they're trying to sell a product.
Right. Why they curate data for newer formats, but for legacy and even to a greater extent vintage, there should be far greater amounts of data available. Now, shout out to the guys over Justin Gennari and his team over on the vintage side. They're doing the exact same work we're doing with the legacy project, week to week, every week, and killing it. And so
I'm just really curious if, like, we went from data was just available to data was not available because they didn't want formats to be solved this quickly. Did that actually work? Do we know if the concealing of data actually helped formats not get solved this quickly?
From that.
No, honestly, I think if anything, it gives these older formats the illusion that they're solved. And the reason I say that is because I still believe, even in 2022, even the era fire design, there are still tiny little holes in legacy as a format where there are things that can happen and decks that can appear that are not thought of until somebody thinks of them and tries it and tries it and tries it and tunes and iterates and tunes and iterates. And I've seen a lot of that over this past year. Just the creation of 8 mulch in general as a deck shows that there's still ways to approach archetypes in a fashion that allows you to attack the format if you're thinking in context of the format. And it shows that there are still holes in the format that let you do that. So the format isn't totally solved, that there's still ways to attack the format. There's a guy in Europe who is one of the premier players on the Thassa's Oracle Thoughtlash Paradigm Shift deck. And he literally just won the 4 Seasons event this back with that deck because he has spent so much time
4 Seasons landscaping,
iterating iterating, trying different things, doing this, doing that, and finding ways to make this deck work in a format. So I think your answer to your question is it didn't work, but at the same time, the format's not solved still yet. I think that there's still things in the format that can happen.
So a continuation on that then is, would that mean that if we had access to all the data that they withhold, that by withholding the data, they're actually scaling a format faster? Like, is it doing the exact opposite of what they want? Because if
I think you're giving them too much credit, Phil. I think you're giving them way too much credit.
Hold on. I'm saying that, like, an example of what Joe just said about people are trying things, but you're only seeing select number of 5-0s released every so often. The decks that could attack those formats that aren't 5-0ing because they're not as refined, they're not as well tuned. You're not seeing those ideas. Somebody's not seeing an idea and going, "Oh, that's really interesting. I should try that and also iterate on it."
Right.
And then then the format would theoretically, if that churn happens, then the format would shift a lot faster, a lot more, and at that point it wouldn't feel stale. Is what I'm getting at.
Yes.
So, like,
I agree.
Is the withholding? Is the withholding of data actually doing the opposite of what they want it to do?
No, I think you're right. I do agree with that. I think if we had more data, I think we would be able to make more informed decisions. And I think you would see, okay, well, this person's playing this, and we're getting they're getting these results off of this deck. If that person is not vocal about it already on Twitter or, wherever they post about it, and I think that's part of the problem. One person also can only do so much.
Yeah.
So, the hive mind does a lot more. And if you have a group of people working on something, if it's a reasonable idea, then, you're going to get traction with it. But that's the problem, is getting traction with it. And it's just, I think you're right. I think if they had more data available and they were more transparent with that, I think we could see things that, okay, this is what needs to be attacked in the format. Somebody's going to go, okay, how do I figure something out that attacks that?
Here's my issue is that they're curating this in some way, right? Like there's somebody who's like, here we go, here's what we're doing. The person that's curating this has no idea what they're doing either. Like, I don't think that they're doing it in a way that's like logical. I think that they're just like, it's my week to do this. I picked this one and that one. And that one, these seem to have different decks in them. I'm throwing them out there. They're not like doing it in a way that's like smart or like malicious. They're doing it in a way that's like lazy. I think that that's the bigger issue, is that like the data we're getting we can't get any information from that data based on what they're choosing. I just literally think it's somebody who's like, this is my job this week. Roll a die, I'll take these two. I don't even care.
And here's the other thing, like, you don't know how many 5-0s a deck specialist posts in a week, because only one deck list gets posted.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing to think about. Like Phil said, if we had more data, okay, so you would see, okay, this guy who plays Thought Lash, the Thought Lash combo deck, if, say, he gets 6 trophies in the span of a week or whatnot, that's one deck that's going to get published. Well, if you had all access to all that data, you could see, oh, this guy gets, he's got 6 trophies this week on this deck. Maybe that's worth looking into. Yeah. Like, that's the thing. Like, that's what you have to think about. Like, and I mean, there's things like that. Like, there's the guy who plays Alurin consistently on Magic Online, Charble. How many trophies does Charble get in a week with Alurin? Is Alurin actually really good? Like, against, the format? We don't know that because not much data gets posted there. The problem with challenges, and this feeds back into challenges, what people play in leagues is not necessarily what people play in challenges, because the league data is so incomplete and so curated. People tend to skew their thoughts towards the larger competitive events, and you don't see as much of the decks that may be good, that may be putting up greater results, because people don't see them as competitive enough because they don't see those results.
Yeah, I keep thinking that the biggest variable as to between asking for a legacy panel and calling for bans is that because the community and WotC are not looking at equivalent data sets, we're looking at different data sets. Right. We're going to make different decisions based on those data sets. And so we are functionally looking at different formats, or effectively looking at different formats.
Right. And it's hard. Like, we try to do what we best we can to provide enough data, but there's always going to be that big hole because of leaks.
Yeah. Oh, you guys are doing incredible work. I'm saying that, like, even with you guys are doing incredible work. They're not looking at your work. They're looking at the mountains of league data that they have access to because it's WotC. And so when we're analyzing the format based on the super in-depth data that you've collected, and they're looking at their own data, which is just all of it. Right. And like, what you're able to collect is a different format than what they see.
Right. Now, granted, for me and my point of view is that, you know, I've had this discussion with people, and there's some that say, well, why do you bother collecting the data at all? And I say, I would rather be more informed than less informed. And just having something to show you some trends, maybe what you can predict or something like that, is helpful. So I think it's still going to be helpful, but I do believe that there is that big hole there of leak data that we don't see, because we are getting all the challenge data at least. So, but that's the thing, like, that is at a large competitive level. And when I say large, there is, you know, that fact that we're only getting events that are 60 to 80, you know, around there. Like last weekend was 60 for Saturday, 82 for Sunday. Like,
and those are players that are playing every week. It's
right.
The same
a lot of them are. Yeah. A lot of them are. Yeah.
So it's a very small percentage of people who play Legacy, because there's a lot of Legacy players that just aren't playing on Moto.
Right. Yeah. And it's the same way for like formats like Vintage as well. Like, they have the same issues and stuff like that. A lot of the players that show up are just repeat players who are so good at predicting the metagame week to week, because, you know, and that's where, like, you get these, you know, you get players like Matt Fook who are like really good at predicting the metagame, because they're also have access to the data. They can see the data. Everybody has access to the data and they can see the data. It's just they're a little bit better of analyzing it, understanding it, and using it
especially if you're dealing with it week to week. If you see that a trend happens where, like, you know, 7 weeks ago you saw X deck get really good, and then like the week after, the deck that beat that got really good, and then the week after, the deck that beat that got really good. You could jump ahead 6 weeks and be like, well, if these are the things that happen every time this deck gets good, and the deck that got played the most the next week was a deck in response to that, if I'm able to beat that deck, you know, I should play this, but I should also be beating the deck that people have played 2 weeks ago. You know, I think that's one of the really cool things about, like, dealing with that data, is that you get to see a much broader scope of what happens, as opposed to, like, you know, whenever I look at it, I'm just looking at like what's happening this week.
Right.
You know?
And I think right now, even though we're all still kind of raw on Blue Red Delver and stuff like that, I think there is still places in the format where you can have fun and still have a reasonably good time with the format. And I still think there's plenty of decks that you can play that are like not Blue Red Delver, that are reasonable decks that are fun. I will also say too that we mentioned the blast, the whole blast thing and sideboard stuff. Obviously, like, Legacy's a predominantly blue format. Pyroblast and Friends are always going to be good cards in the format. That's never going to change, because it's one of the most efficient ways of dealing with blue cards. Is
by and Friends, did you mean Burnout?
What's that?
By and Friends, did you mean Burnout?
Sure, yeah. However, I will say that it's not just strictly Blue Red Delver that's pushing that. I would say Acast is also kind of pushing that pretty heavily.
Yeah.
Pyroblast is the most efficient answer to Kappa Cannon here.
Yep.
And I think that's a big pushing point too for that. But that's why you're also seeing like depths and stuff like that pop up, because depths and those decks are pretty good against 8-cast as well. 8 Mulch has a pretty reasonable 8-cast matchup if you build the deck right. And those decks adapting
like Tower of the Magistrate to get around Psy and things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I played 8 Mulch at the last Buffalo Chicken event. and two of my wins were I went 4-2 with that deck at that event, and two of the wins were against, I played against Blue Red Delver once, and I played against Acast once, and I beat both of them because my deck was literally tuned to just be like, all right, I'm expecting to play against these two decks at this event. This is how I built my deck.
Yeah. Before we go on, I want to real quick bring up our sponsor, MoxField.com. MoxField.com is a really great deck building website. It's great on a PC. It's great on your Mac. It's great on your phone. You don't need to get an app or anything like that. It's made by my friends Harry and John. And yeah, it's just a really great place to share your legacy decks and your commander decks.
I want to ask if you think it's reasonable that the call to action for the community should shift from calling for, like, I think if we get more bans, right? Like, let's say Murktide is banned. Do we think Delver is actually going to not be as played as the most deck and the best deck in the format? I think it's just going to be the same it's been since Innistrad was released.
Sure.
Delver's been the best deck. It's going to remain the best deck. That's just like, until they hit part of the shell, the threats will be replaced. More powerful stuff's going to come into the format. Delver is always going to be the most efficient thing to be doing. But I think the call to action should be less on, we need to ban these cards so that the next power level of cards that, you know, under Expressive or under Murktide get shoved into the deck, that we call for them, for WotC to be more transparent with the data. Just let us know.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
Let us have the data. I think like if we can focus on getting WotC to do that, because unless they can actually tell us what they're gaining from concealing it, because if it's to keep the format from being stale, they just banned Ragavan, the format didn't change.
Yeah.
But you know, like it seems like that the bannings and ban hammers are not actually changing the format in the way that feels constructive for the format. And I feel like there's this weird looming thing over the format of just not giving us the data. And I feel like if we as a community push for WotC to just be more transparent about that, we can make more informed decisions about what needs to go, if anything needs to go. And I think that would be a more effective use of outreach to WotC than being like, please get rid of the dragon or whatever.
Right,
you know?
right. I also think I'm also kind of the mind that I don't mind the overly mind the tempo shell being like a good deck in the format per se, but I preferred Delver when it had to be in 3 colors.
Yes.
I think when
those
Delver
colors
has
to be blue and red.
Right. Well, I mean, obviously blue red. Yeah. I mean, yeah. Oh yeah. Obviously, yeah. Because
you could play Soul Tide Delver back in the day.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. You can play Bug. Yeah. I think that when Delver has to be in those colors, into a 3rd color of some sort, I feel better about its existence. Now, the obvious exception to that is the Oko era, because Oko itself was just so stupid busted. But or Ren at 6 era, because Ren at 6 era was also like super busted.
I loved Ren 6 era, but I understand.
Yeah. So, but I
like casting Wasteland every turn.
I do like the deck from the standpoint of what's the best way to say this? I like it from the standpoint that it's a deck that exists, that is good in the format, and it teaches good fundamentals of the format. Because I think it does do that. I think it does teach you good fundamentals of the format.
Also, it does, like, that concept doesn't really exist. Like, it tries to exist in other formats, but this is the most the most like pure version of a tempo deck in the game. Like this is like, you can't get this in Vintage because you don't have 4 brainstorms, you don't have 4 ponders, right? You can't get this in Modern because all the cantrips are kind of meh.
Right.
And so this is the one place where you really do get like a feel for what a real tempo deck should look like between Daze and Force of Will. And look, Daze has its problems. I'll be one of the first people to admit. But showing that, like, protect the queen, like play the queen, protect the queen strategy, and then just ride it out and make every turn a time walk for your opponent is like, no other format does that like Legacy does that. And I'd hate to see it go completely. Right. Yeah, I agree.
So I think that there's one aspect about Delver that I've thought about recently in how we discuss it as the best deck. It has been uniquely the best deck for the format for so many years.
Yes.
That it is.
Once a cast, Phil gets to say this.
Well, no, it's different in that, like, it's meta. Like, I would love it. I wish we had. I had thought about this sooner to bring up, like, to look at just like the history of Delver and its metagame percentage since, like, you know, Canadian Thresh existed, because I would be surprised if it ever dipped below 13%.
Right.
But something that's unique about Delver too is that whatever the best version of Delver is also dictates what's good, what other decks are good in the format. So, for example, when Renin 6 Delver was the best deck, was the most played deck, or like the top Delver deck, the actual best deck in the format was Storm.
Right.
Because it didn't care about Renin 6.
Right.
And secondarily, what the deck after that was just Astrolabe.
So
right?
when Ragavan was in the format, so like when Ragavan Delver was the best deck, I think that I would argue that the best deck in that format was actually D&T.
Yes.
They didn't give a fuck about Ragavan.
Yeah.
Right.
No.
Well, and also that deck also is like mono Swords to Plowshares.
No, totally.
Like,
but I'm saying that, like, I'm saying that whatever, like, the best version of Delver dictates what other decks are good in the format. And
right.
I don't know how to, like, calibrate when we think about cards to ban. Like, we're just like looking at whatever, like, the premier threat in that in like banning Delvers. But when you ban Delver, for the most part, like, any banning out of Delver fundamentally shifts the format entirely as to, like,
right.
win percentages across the rest of the field.
Right.
And no other format has a deck like that.
Right.
There's no deck in Modern that if you take one card out of it, all of a sudden every other deck's percentages change.
Right.
Splinter Twin?
Meaningfully, you know.
meaningfully. Yeah, no.
Yeah.
I think to that point, I think the current deck that you're thinking about, that would be the deck right now that sits in that position is 8-cast. I think that's the deck that sits as the true, like, beats up on Delver best deck of the format, to the point where you can see, looking at their, you know, their sideboards, how many cards they're playing that try to hit, you know, 8-cast, from blast effects to meltdown, surgical extraction,
and vice versa. 8-cast doesn't play that many sideboard cards against Delver.
No, because it doesn't need to.
It doesn't need to. It's just
it doesn't need
a powerhouse against Delver. Yeah.
It plays 4 chalices, which are already going to be, like, super good against Delver. And it plays all these cards like, you know, Emery and Psy and Kappa Cannoneer, which laughs at your meltdown. And, you know, so yeah, it plays, you know, Force of Wills and, you know, Metallic Rebukes and, you know, Force Negations out of the sideboard, and just, it plays all these cards. It doesn't care about your Murktide Regent, because it's
also, yeah, Urza Saga Construct plus Shadow Spear is also lights out.
Yes. Oh yeah. Unfortunately, yeah, that's rough. Yeah.
As a person who plays this deck is bonkers. Like, if you don't own it and you can afford to get it, just get the deck. Like, it's so good. It's just like, it's insane how good this deck is. And I like playing, like, this is exactly what I'm talking about. I like playing the Death Shadow deck, but, like, if I want to win, I'm gonna play 8-cast.
Yeah.
You know,
I feel that way about 8 Mulch Lands, because I think that deck is also secretly, like, super absurd.
I just want to quickly hop back to Joe. You talking about Delver existing in 3 colors, and I want to talk about that real quick, because I was trying to think, what if tomorrow they got rid of Murktide and Expressive? Would Delver have to go back to a 3rd color?
I think so.
And I don't think they would.
There would be, like, Is It Delver was a deck before anyhow.
It was.
I don't think it stopped being a deck.
Yeah, I don't think it stopped being a deck. But I don't think it ends up being the best version of the deck.
Yeah.
So is it Delver or Blue Red Delver before, when it was playing like Swift Spear and stuff, was just a variant of Burn more than it was a variant of Delver.
Right.
Like Treasure Cruise Burn was basically just Delver, right?
But if you got rid of the Dragon and Expressive tomorrow, the first place that I would go is, okay, I'm going to pick up Ledger Shredder and Predict.
Yeah, Predict is already seeing a measure of play in certain areas. There's the one of the Zoomers, Bullwinkle, Isaac Bullwinkle, has been playing variants of Delver that are basically Delverless Delver, They don't play any Delvers whatsoever.
I mean, that was the case when Ragavan was the thing.
Right.
People were just like, why do we need this card in the deck? It's not good.
Now it's like,
this.
now it's like 4 DRC, 2 Brazen Borrow, 4 Murktide, and they're playing 4 Expressive and 2 Predict. And you're just like, I agree. Predict is good. I think Predict is really good with Dragon's Race Channeler, and it's pretty good with Ledger Shredder.
I mean, that was a longer point to say that I think that there are as more and more playable cards get printed, further and further away do we get from needing to dip into a third color, because there are powerful enough threats within their colors of just blue-red and card advantage cards within just blue-red that before, when your best threat was your third best threat was Goyf. So you're like, okay, well, I need to play at least 14 threats in my deck or whatever. So I have to reach into a third color because I don't have any other good ones in blue or red. Whereas nowadays, I feel like there are plenty, because beyond Letter Shredder, you still have Ethereal Forger in the lineup. Like you talked about, there's the potential for Sailor's Bane. I mean, there's some number of Brazen Borrower to be played.
Hey man, Death Shadow is a Delver deck.
I think I'm more okay with some of those other threats though. Like I'm more okay with Ledger Shredder, and I'm more okay with Ethereal Forger. And the only reason I'm okay with Ethereal Forger is that once you delve with it, if they deal with it, your value is just lost. Like, and I that card is so fragile to an extent. Like it dies to a bolt, it dies to plow. You're not going to hit it with Prismatic Ending. You're not going to hit it with like Fatal Push or something like that. But dying to like Blast, Bolt, and Plow is pretty good.
Oh, I agree with everything that you're saying. I was making the point that
I agree, and it would take a long time to get. It would take a while. They would have to print something in another color that would be really, really strong enough that would push it to that other color.
Yeah, I'm saying that I think that Delver is strong enough now, even if they get rid of Expressive and Dragon, that it would still be powerful enough in blue-red, and they would have the luxury to go into a third color when the next busted thing is printed outside of blue-red.
Yeah.
You know what's wild is...
Go on. That is just to conclude. I'm saying that the part of the argument about Delver and bannings around Delver was better for Legacy when it was in 3 colors because it was more susceptible to whatever. Right. I think that part of the discussion for Delver, I think, is in the past now, because there are enough premier threats and card advantage in just blue-red that they don't actually have to dip into a third. They don't have to dip into a third color by necessity. They get to do it by luxury. Right. And that's very different from 5 years ago.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
It's wild to think that 5 months ago, we were like all on the just get rid of Daze, just do it. Just it's time.
I'm still there I'm still beyond that, because one thing that we don't have in any data set is we don't get to see win percentage on the play versus on the draw.
Yeah.
Right.
And
that's much harder to get.
It's way harder to get. It feels impossible to actually get.
Yeah. But you
could, but
here's the thing. Okay, so to put in clarification, because I'm not sure how many people actually know how we collect data too, and a lot of that is because
on the ground reporting.
It is. There's a lot of on the ground reporting. People will report what they played and who they played against and stuff like that. But a big chunk of that is done by replay watching. And so what happens is if you're in an event on Magic Online, once the event is completely over, and this is where it gets really tedious.
Oh my god,
the event has to be,
you guys are saints.
Over.
This is ridiculous.
Completely means top 8 has to be finished and everything. You have to not close the window the entire time. The window has to stay open the entire time, and then once the event's done, you can watch replays from any of the events in the deck in the any of the games in the event, any of them.
That's absurd, Joe. That's absurd, Joe. That's what you guys do.
That's what we do. Yeah.
The whole podcast should just close on that. That's insane.
I actually have a question. Have you guys ever, because the amount of work that you have to put in to get this kind of data set, especially with the tedious work that you just pointed out, have you ever considered, and I don't know how reliable it would be, if that's a lot of the work is just watching replays, figuring out what the deck lists are, and then maybe adding play draw and watching through all that. Have you ever thought about like big community spreadsheet to crowdsource that, to be like, hey, I'm going to take, one person can just hop in and be like, I'll take these games, and just like see if anybody else is willing to like volunteer to help you guys
but who
out?
can you trust?
That's the thing about that is
I
I have a core group of people who collect week to week, who are playing in the events. And that's the thing is like, it's so tedious enough to gather what replays are left of an event typically.
I will then say, if the case is like to reliable data collection, then I would rather end on, do you have like a Patreon or anything?
We do.
People then, so like everybody on listen,
don't
go
donate
support
to us
Joe
this week. Support Joe.
Yeah, it's patreon.com/legacy data collection.
There you go.
Go.
Joe.
Yeah,
project.
we'll fucking link you.
Yeah,
Link below.
Yeah.
Where our Patreon normally is.
Honestly, I would care more about having more people who are playing in the events to actually help collect data, to be honest with you. And I say that because the more people that help, the faster things go.
Yeah.
In the long run. And what also happens is Moto is not super great technically with this kind of stuff. So one of the big things that happens is, as you're watching replays, it's caching a lot of that information into memory, into RAM, while you're doing that. So if you don't have a real beefy computer, you're not going to probably watch a ton of replays, because it's going to cache all that in the RAM. I've had I don't often get to play in these events myself. I usually just am like in the background doing the management aspect of it, and I manage all the location of the files and all the sheets and once it's all done, I manage the charts and I take the screenshots and I post it all to Twitter and I do all that stuff generally. So I'm not generally getting to play in these events because usually my weekends are kind of busy.
You got kids.
I have a 7-year-old, and
yeah,
my weekends are usually busy. I was out of town this past weekend, so
Well, in that regard, we can at least say, if you're willing to do that sort of thing,
please join our Discord.
You have, we've got a Discord for the show. You can, Joe is Volrath XP.
Yeah.
And you can just reach out to him there.
Also, the Discord link for the Legacy project is in all of the sheets we publish.
Perfect.
So yeah, definitely join the Discord if you think you can help. Honestly, that's like the biggest thing, because if Moto decides to crash on somebody and they're like the only person collecting replays, then we have to go sleuthing. And I hate sleuthing, and I hate having to do that. But and generally, we do get the job done. I have 2 people on my team.
At least 4,000 times this year.
Yeah, we've had to do it a couple times. I have 2 people on my team. One of which is Ron Kopel-Sinese, who is Nicola Guidi, and Carl, who also is the guy who handles all of our OCR stuff for the project. And they're both really good at sleuthing this kind of stuff. So the other thing that we started doing, and this is a little bit more in depth, is if you've ever looked at any of our newer sheets, we get all the round data too. We get the round by round data too. So that lets us get information such as head-to-head data. So this gets updated on a periodic basis, where we can tell you, okay, see here, look on the sheet. So I can tell you 8cast, currently has a, go all the way up. 8cast currently has a 44.37% win rate against Blue Red Dolphin. I can tell you that right now, but I don't know when this was updated.
Which is extremely important info.
Right. Yeah, I have to see when he updated this, because he's been keeping it up to date. Last updated on 6/6, so that's current. So currently, 8cast is not doing very well against Blue Red Delver.
They figured out play 7 red elemental blasts.
Right. So so it's stuff like that. But we wouldn't have that information if we weren't collecting. If we were just collecting strictly win-loss information, you don't get that information. So what we have to do is we also collect the round by round data, which basically says round one, this person played against this person and they won. This person played against this person and they lost. And that is a lot of data. And I'm real thankful for the fact that the way we have that figured out is one of our folks on the project, Carl, they have we take screenshots of all that. And he takes those screenshots and he OCRs them and turns that into usable data and fills all that information in. Wow. And so we have a process and we have work. Yes. I helped with Eternal Weekend last year with one of the Eternal Weekend events, and it took us a good couple hours to finish one of those events. So it's tedious work, but at the end of the day, it's like once you get used to it. I mean, once you get used to
it's like anything. That's how it is with the video editing and stuff. Right. Yeah.
That's also a reason sometimes people ask us questions about things like data classifications and stuff like that. We have a list of all the data classifications, what they are, what each deck falls under, all that sort of stuff. Some people, ask, okay, why are X deck and this deck, like why do you not separate Delverless Blue Red Delver, from Blue Red Delver? And it's like, okay, you watch a replay and you tell me if this deck has Delver in it or not.
Yeah.
It's really hard to do that.
It's hard.
Off of a
they
replay.
Didn't draw it in the first round. Who knows?
Right. Exactly. So you may watch a game where you never see it and you can maybe conclude, well, that's Delverless, but you don't really know.
Yeah, of course.
There was a reason why when we first started this project, we started to get a little too granular with the snow decks and at the time, and the snow decks all played like the same, like 40 cards. And so
Moto's 20th year anniversary.
Yes.
Is this
can
year,
we
right?
Can we talk about that for a second?
Yeah. Happy birthday, Moto.
Because
I just want to say, like, what you just brought up is I feel like that's data that, now I'm not a programmer, so call me if I'm wrong here, but it seems like the kind of data for challenges, at least for deck lists, to get that kind of information of like which decks are Delverless and which ones aren't. Every deck that's entered into a challenge, shouldn't Moto have the capacity to like list all of the players in the deck list that they played and then be able to look at the deck list and see if that's true or not?
Right. Yeah.
That like I'm assuming that is the capacity for that is there. And that's also something like I'm thinking of all of the ways that we can communicate to WotC, ways that would improve our experience with Legacy. And I feel like that would be one of them, which goes along with the transparency thing.
Right. Yeah. So segue into that because Zach mentioned loving 8cast and recommending people playing 8cast. If you pay $25 on Magic Online right now, you can go play 8cast.
That's right. The key,
literally any other deck in the format, because there's an All-Access token and it lasts until June 29th this time.
That's like almost a full month. Well, I mean, we're in the 8th. It's 20
3
days.
weeks. 3 weeks. Yeah.
21 days exactly. You're right.
Yes.
3 weeks.
So yeah, definitely. If you're thinking about playing Legacy or any other format on there, definitely get in on that because it's well worth it. And of course, that also brings me to the topic of what the hell, Moto? Why are there so many cards from Commander Legends not programmed on this client? Oh my god!
Is there a reason why they don't put them on there?
So there was a reason for this. So what I read was that because of the transition period for them transitioning from the Magic Online team to Daybreak Games, taking over at Magic Online, there was a bit of a resource crunch. They weren't able to finish the set on Magic Online in time.
So that makes.
But they did that with some previous sets too, right?
There are quite a few Commander cards that are missing on.
Like we still can't play with currency converter.
Oh
right?
no, actually they just added that one.
There you go,
so
Zach. You're in it now.
Added that one.
Convert your currency to currency converters.
All
today.
the Lance players are so thrilled.
For sure.
I got tagged by Albert Lindblom on Twitter about it, and I was like, well, I can add that card to a deck and it's not red anymore. And he was like, oh my god, I'm so happy. Like that's so
lost
thrilled.
this weekend now. Yeah.
Right.
I need to make like a JG Wentworth style commercial for the cast that's like, convert your currency to currency converters now. Are you sitting on currency that could be currency converters? We'll
That's
get
your
you
next
cash
short, Zach,
settlements right now.
That's your next short, Zach.
There you go.
Joe.
The big one is I keep hearing is Maddening Hex is also like a really good card in Legacy.
Yeah.
That seems pretty good, and it's not on Magic Online either.
That's like kind of a Sulfuric Vortex with like D6 or something.
Yeah. They cast a non-creature spell, you roll a D6 and they take damage equal to that. And that's like super absurd. Like I've heard people that like they've taken like 15 to 20 to 12 to 15 points of damage just trying to get rid of the thing.
Yeah,
like just trying to dig.
That feels more like what's that green red legend that every time you cast a non-creature spell it domes you for 6?
Rorikthar.
Yeah,
Rorikthar. This is very Rorikthar.
A great reanimator target.
But Joe, quick question with the transition to Daybreak games and the improvements that we assume Daybreak games is going to bring to Moto. What are for you and your team's processes for collecting data? What would be the top things that you would want to see Daybreak add to Moto to make your life collecting data better?
Oh God, I don't think they would ever do that.
Assuming that Daybreak Games is just going to give us all the toys we want.
Some sort of like spectator mode where you can watch replays outside of the event, which used to exist. That used to exist.
It's in there.
The problem is with that is there was external people scraping data from that using applications to do that, and that's why they cut that off.
So that was just a means for them to conceal the data collection.
Right.
Oh, that's so dirty.
And there's a reason why every so often somebody approaches us with we could make your guys' life so much easier if we programmed a tool. And I'm like, no, I won't have any discussion of that. Like I always shut that down real quick because then you'll
lose then
we lose it for good. Yeah, we lose it for good. Yeah. And I'm like, they already know what we do. I'm going to say that right now. Wizards already is aware of what we do. They are already aware of what the Vintage team does. Because they know not last year, but the year before when they did the Eternal Weekend Online, they had those coverage things that they did with a couple of people from the community, like Julian and Anurag and Justin Gennari on the Vintage side. And Justin said, they know what we do. They know about our data collection project, and he said, and they were okay with it because it's crowdsourced, not automatic, not scraping, none of that. There's nothing that breaks the Magic Online TOS. It's crowdsourced, and that's the only reason they fly under the radar. We all fly under the radar of this.
Oh, that's such horseshit.
So
all right, we're running long on this one. Joe, it's been a pleasure, man. It's so good to have you back on the cast.
I'm glad to be here.
This was a blast and incredibly enlightening. This was wild. I had no idea you guys did all this stuff manually.
Yeah, it's pretty tedious. But
so again, please go support Joe's the Legacy Data Collection Patreon.
Please
go join their Discord. And if you have free time to ever help out or join or help them out in any way that's possible that they need, hop in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Legacy is more and more becoming community driven. These guys are at the forefront. So let's help them out.
What can you, the viewer, do for us? You can like and subscribe. That would be nice. That would be nice. We really appreciate and subscribe.
That. Yes.
But that's it for us this week. Everyone have a good week. Be safe. Later on.
Bye.
Hey, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Check out this other video. You'll probably like it.